So we had a very good session today where we heard from different eminent speakers on Agri PV. And the only better way to end this session is to launch the NSEFI and IGF joint report on the status of Agri PV in India and policy recommendations. So I will now proceed with taking all of you through the report. And once we approach the launch slide, on my count of three, I would request all my fellow panelists to say launch, and then we can officially launch the report. So while let's talk about the report that we have made. I hope you can all see my screen. This is a report that both NSEFI and IGF have been working on over the past 1.5 years. The idea was to investigate the projects that are already existing with respect to agrivoltaics in the Indian context, study them, understand the motivation behind them, and sort of look into the building of them and the construction of them, and then go towards the policy recommendations and recommend sustainable and effective policy measures. And we have found predominantly 3 to 4 interesting conclusions from our visit through all these plants. There are total 13 agrovoltaic plants in India, and most of them, almost half of them, are situated in the state of Gujarat. And we do have a couple of projects near Delhi NCR, and also one project down south in Telangana, which Ms. Gupta has presented. If you have listened to Ms. Gupta, she made a very interesting observation that they need service providers to carry out the agriculture part of the agrivoltaics in the plants. And that is one of the main observation that we had as part of this study, that the farming activity and the solar are sort of conducted by two different parties. And most of the time, we found that there is some lapse of communication between both these parties, which was directly affecting the operations and the growth of crops in the plant. The third important point that we had observed, and in fact this is something that we were able to evidently see in Dr. Santra's presentation, and even Mr. Saraf also pointed out, that the extent of integrating commercial crops under the solar panels or between the interspace of the arrays has not been yet fully explored. So technically we have not arrived at a juncture where we can tell Indian Agro PV has achieved a state where we are able to now weigh out the trade-off between the commercial crops output or the yield and the performance of the PV that is installed in that location. The last point, which all of you have unanimously agreed, starting from Max to Mr. Saraf, Ms. Gupta and Dr. Santra, that the policy framework does not actually provide sufficient clarity to do it, which is something that is a point that as NSEFI and IGF in the coming days will be very much looking forward to advocate on behalf of stakeholders to the government. So another interesting observation we found when it comes to the agrivoltaics in India is that the existing plants can be categorized into 3 types of agrivoltaic farmings. One is the interspace farming, where the crops are cultivated between the space of 2 rows, and this is very easy. You don't need to raise the structure's height. You don't need to invest much, and this is something that many developers or many research and development institutions are opting for as a means of agrivoltaics. The second part, which is slowly getting a lot of interest among the stakeholders, is farming below the panels, which are anyhow installed at conventional structure height. You have seen this evidently in Ms. Gupta's presentation, where Mahindra Sustain installed in the crops, the lemongrass crop under the panel that was installed at the conventional height from the beginning, while as it was planned, and it was not altered or it was not planned to accommodate Agro PV before. So that is something that we are seeing an increasing trend among developers who want to adopt that part of Agro PV, because you can sort of retrofit it in your existing solar plants or the land that you have it. The third part, which I think by the very definition should be called agrovoltaics, is elevating the structure's height, where you're at least increasing the height up to 3 meters, and you're growing crops below that. And we do have good examples of that. You will find those examples in the report. We had one at MET. There's one in Jain Irrigation in the state of Maharashtra, where they're growing bananas, they're growing mustard, they're growing rice, which are generally crops which that are taller than 2 to 3 meters. So this is the overview of the type of agrivoltaics that are being adopted in Indian context. Now, as a policy advocacy body representing the stakeholders, and IGEF, which works in conjunction with the goals of the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy and the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy, we sort of developed a prescription of policy recommendations based on the experiences we have seen in other countries, and also the experiences we have seen from the plants that are installed in India. And these are pretty much straightforward. And basically, when we were developing these policy recommendations, we referred to the template of India's most successful solar proliferation policy, which is the Jawaharlal Nehru National Solar Mission. So the first and foremost part of such mission is to strategically deploy the targets, so that we will have a clear roadmap of how much agrivoltaic capacity does the government foresee in the coming year, and so on for the next 10 years. So I think that is something that we have strongly recommended in this study. And in the next slide, you will see when I take you through it, we have suggested 15 gigawatt will be a very modest and achievable target for agrivoltaics in the next 10 years in the Indian context. The second part, which is also very integral to India's clean energy goals, we have seen the way Indian tenders have evolved from purely solar-based bids to some innovation in the way solar is bid, and then clubbing solar and wind. And then we want that evolution to not stop with hybrid solar and wind, but to evolve further into solar and agriculture, where the government can specifically tender agrivoltaic projects in the selected pockets of the country. This can be either adopted in the same way like the Gujarat government did, by allocating the land that is under the purview of utility, or the government can adopt the same procedure that it adopts while it tenders projects for large-scale solar plants, as we have seen in the past. Apart from tenders, we are also requesting the government or suggesting the government to focus on pilot projects, because today, in the last 1.5 hours, we have seen we were able to witness the actual ground level implementation, the ground level data, the ground level results of agrivoltaic projects. And this information is pretty much basic for developers or industry or corporate to target agrivoltaics in the country. So we think pilot projects will, one, boost India's agrivoltaic capacity, at the same time will give the much needed knowledge base, or will establish the much needed knowledge base for other developers to look at it, refer it, and adopt it in their current or upcoming plans. The third part, which is very, very important, and today we have seen Dr. Santra elaborate on it, and fortunately or coincidentally, India's some of the pivotal agrivoltaic projects have come up as a byproduct of the cooperation between academia and industry. So we still think that there is an acute need for national level research program, where as a federation we are very much willing to support from the industry side, and we need to establish a platform where industry and the academia are brought into a single platform. They sit on the same table. They identify the prospective problems. Academia can help with their thorough and comprehensive R&D background, while the industry can innovate and ensure that agrivoltaics will also become cost viable and economically feasible in the Indian context. Because we personally believe, or in fact, in the last 2-3 weeks, this has been the talk of the industry, where India discovered its lowest tariff of 2 rupee per kilowatt. And if such price sensitivity is to be maintained, then we personally believe that there should be a lot of innovation and comprehensive R&D that should happen at the ground level between industry and academia to make agrivoltaics popular. The fourth point, which is actually, it was supposed to be the first point if we weight it according to the priority. In India, we have a very funny situation where land use classification is established, and a particular land which has been classified for its use cannot be used for other purpose. And being an agrarian country, the laws or the rules are very strict for using agriculture land for commercial activity. The moment you start installing solar on the agriculture land, it will be perceived as a commercial land, and the agriculture value or the agriculture classification will be lost. So there is an acute, need to blend the land use classification or add a separate category for agrivoltaic plants, so that the developers or the farmers will not have any confusion and will have clarity while implementing agrivoltaic plants. KUSUM scheme, component A, which has been talked today since in the last 1.5 hours, actually provides a provision in 2 lines where it states that developers can use the farmland to install solar at a particular height and carry out both agriculture activities as well as carry out solar power production. So I think the specifying land use classification will go a long way into addressing the logjam which is currently existing in the market for agrivoltaics. The next point is very, very important, and Max and his team are very much working on it. Any technological evolution life cycle depends upon the way the standards are developed and they're enforced. And particularly for a sensitive technology like agrivoltaics, which is affecting both farmers and the PV output, we need to establish the quality standards and technical norms right at the beginning of the the evolution of agrivoltaics, so that there will be a reference document for developers to refer to when they go out and start implementing agrivoltaic projects. We have seen this work in the case of other applications, be it O&M, installation, and other aspects of solar power plant development ecosystem. And we think for agrivoltaics also, this is very much necessary and important. The last, but not the least, aspect of our recommendations is financial incentives. Very often, we heard Honorable Prime Minister mention that India has 2 ambitious goals for 2022. The first one being 100 gigawatt of solar energy installation, and second one being doubling the farmers' income. So doubling the farmers' income in its integrity has innovation as a part of it, and agrivoltaics will bring that innovation to ensure farmers' income is doubled. At the same time, farmers who are predominantly dependent upon crops for their income should also be incentivized for having or installing solar on their lands. And this incentive should, apart from the lease that they get while installing solar on their land, this incentive should also come from a particular component or a particular composition of the tariff that is paid to the solar plants that are installed on agriculture lands. To an extent, we are very happy to see governments in India, state governments in India, coming up with sumoto tariff documents or feed-in tariff documents for KUSUM Component A. As of yesterday, the count is 10. 10 states in India have either approved or are in the process of approving tariff for installing solar plants on agriculture lands. And I think apart from this, the scheme of KUSUM, we would require more proactive incentives from the state governments and the central government to the farmers, to the developers, so that agrivoltaics will become both scalable and popular in the Indian context. As I mentioned, our target recommendation is 15,000 megawatt in the next 10 years. We are proposing a humble addition of 50 to 100 megawatt in the next 1 to 2 years, and slowly scaling it up to 200, 500 and 700, and then 1,000 to 2,000 and 3,000 to 5,000 megawatt per year in the installed year-on-year installed capacity, which will lead to 15,000 aggregate megawatt of Agro PV in India. With this, I would request all our panelists to sort of say launch on my count of 3, so that we can officially launch this report. 1, 2, 3.
Launch.
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 Thank you very much for your participation, and we are very much looking forward to all of your comments. The reports will be live on NSEFI website and IGEF website, and this is a preliminary report of our findings and suggestions, and there is another report that is coming up, and which will also provide you a comprehensive overview of other installations across the globe and the practices India can adopt. Thank you very much.